All right. Hello, everyone. This is Selena, back again for episode 2 of the Designing Activism podcast. And I have Chitika Vasudeva here again as a guest or a co-host.
Sure, both, either.
Commonly reoccurring character in the story of the podcast. I don't know. So welcome back. Today's
Thank you.
Today's episode, it's been a while since we've done this, since the first one, just a lot of things caught up to us. But the topic today is I want to talk about social media, quote-unquote activism, and like the idea of, slacktivism, as it's commonly referred to, or maybe even like the idea that, of just empty clicks in social media,
Yeah. Well, it's something that, you and I definitely have been a part of, knowingly or unknowingly, and I'm sure all of our listeners are. The funny thing is the way they get here is probably by, using the same social media platforms that we're starting to kind of criticize today. So make of that what you will. But, yeah, everyone talks about, one like is one prayer and please help.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Whatever.
There's been so much controversy over that topic, especially recently. I think obviously we're in a quote unquote social media age. I feel like the idea of, hashtags is nowadays so,
pervasive.
Yeah. It's everywhere, and literally it's so easy to just do a click and a whatever. Yeah.
Well, I don't know how far back you want to go into this, and I'm not exactly an expert, but
we are not experts on this, but
right.
We're just voicing our opinions.
But the way I understand is that with the Arab Spring, social media was such a big kind of way to for the movement to catch, I guess to gain traction and become something that people were aware of and concerned about. And you still see that. And I don't think this was a nationally discussed issue so much, but in India, the state of Kashmir was cut off and put under marital law or something kind of overnight. Nobody knew about that. I'm here, so I don't know about it as much as I should. But obviously, when you cut off a community from the internet, that's an interesting way to think of the kind of power of these tools as well, is that we do need them and kind of use them to stay connected. And so that's the baseline with which they were created and promoted. But that because they're so pervasive, like you said, it becomes so easy to just get a false sense of doing your job. And people always, it's you get a reaction too, where you're kind of oh, this is important, I should share it, and you
and
kind of
spread the word, But really, sometimes, what does that actually do? It just, I don't know, empty clicks or empty likes, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Does it actually lead to something effective? I guess in the never-ending cycle of social media, there's a lot of examples of this in the real world. We were just talking earlier today about the Amazon fires, the fire in the Amazonia, whatever you want to call it, that's going on right now, and everyone's just talking about it, but no one knows what to do. But everyone just keeps sharing the stories and spreading the word. And I guess in a lot of ways that's a really great way to
just raise awareness.
Yeah. I guess we're arguing on the side of maybe social media is not the best form of activism, but in a lot of ways it is really great as a news source. I know me and a lot of people, I'm not as guilty of it as some people, but people use Twitter as a news feed, right?
Yeah.
And that's completely made of hashtags. Your trending page is just hashtags mostly.
Yeah, well, I think the problem so much is, well, since you brought up the the fires in the Amazon. The issue isn't that like people use social media platforms to spread awareness, because that is how I learned about it too. It's not like I actually heard about it on the news or anything. But the problem is that there doesn't seem to be a step 2 after that. And I mean, this scenario I think we'll come to in a second, because it kind of highlights a different problem. But even with things like God, I can't think of a decent example. But in general, even when there are kind of steps you can take to contribute to a situation that goes beyond like sharing or liking. Yeah, like
donation pages or like foundation links or something like that, I guess would be an example.
Well, even beyond that, I mean, if it's something as simple as, say, climate change, people will say, oh, like X inches of sea rise occurred this year, which is scary. Or you'll see on like Instagram, if you follow like Nat Geo or Now This or like Leonardo DiCaprio, it's always, whatever, like this summer was the hottest in a decade, or like you're there and you experience it. But that awareness doesn't translate into like, let's turn the light off every time we leave the house, or let's, I don't know, cut out like red meat from our diets, or whatever people are supposed to be able to do, because you just kind of go to a dinner party, you talk about it, you get really worked up, and then you kind of like...
Then just leave it at that.
You just let it go, so...
Oh, dinner party workups. People get so heated.
Yeah. And this is a total aside, but I remember I think I was in middle school, and there was like a big conversation going on in the living room about whatever political situation, and I got so annoyed I left. And I was like, none of y'all do anything about this. First of all, you live in Kuwait when you're an Indian citizen, so you can vote in either country.
Yeah, so why...
like, this is really rich of you to be so upset. And if you're so worked up, then, like, why did you kind of, like, eliminate your own civic rights? I don't understand.
No, I totally get that.
That's a whole other thing, but... yeah, and so I think the social media issue kind of highlights this problem in the strategy of activism sometimes, where we say, well, we have to raise awareness about these things, which makes a lot of sense, because you think of like a lot of major kind of wrongdoings in the world and like our history, and that people always say how like, well, in the beginning nobody knew this was happening. That's specifically true. Like with the Holocaust, that's always like part of the story. And so obviously now in this day and age we have the power to make awareness like happen really quickly, and I think maybe there's a lot of leftover energy from like once upon a time it took a lot of effort to just raise awareness about an issue, and then that was considered like enough of a thing because it took like work. But now it takes nothing really to spread awareness.
Like back then, the act of even like reaching out to people or like creating awareness, that was activism
in itself.
And then like the solution sort of came along with that, because in the act of reaching out, they were most likely reaching out to certain people, like legislation or something that could have I don't know, you know what I mean.
Sure.
But nowadays, like reaching out is as simple as like retweeting.
Yeah,
it's like literally
it doesn't
one
take
button,
anything.
Couple clicks, like, and a lot of the things is the issues that I have with it is that, like, for example, in the Amazon fire situation, like, how many people actually took the time to research the issue before sharing it? They're saying, like, oh, the Earth's lungs are on fire, right? But, like...
What does that even mean?
Yeah, what does that mean? Like, do they know, like, the exact science behind it? Like, there's a lot more to the Amazon fires than just, they're on fire. Like, there's a whole political... like situation behind it. There's a lot of reasons for it, and a lot of it's purposeful, but people don't necessarily see that. They're just like, oh, pray for
Amazonia,
pray for Amazonia, but really you should be like considering all the factors that are coming into this like situation. Like, it's mostly political actually in that way. So
yeah. And then, well, since you're talking about kind of like having knowledge on the issue you're advocating for, the whole like Sony versus Disney thing.
Oh, the Spider-Man. Oh,
right,
yeah.
Which we were talking about earlier too, where and I didn't know this. I mean, I was just kind of
I saw it on Twitter.
Like, I wasn't like, I'm not as invested in the whole like situation.
Yeah.
But I didn't see this until recently, which I saw this like post that kind of clarified the situation,
like the
and,
actual events
right,
that happened,
right? And maybe you want to go over that like for the listeners in a bit, but it's really interesting to see kind of how people took like the one headline or the one, you know, hashtag, and we're like, oh, boycott Sony, when really
the bad guy is more technically on Disney. Like it's so Sony owns the rights to Spider-Man the movies. There's like
and like the character,
well, technically no, because there's a whole lot of like there's a lot of really weird nuances in comic book characters. So like there's there's a ownership for like the comic book character, I think. There's the ownership for like the movie character, the movie rights, then also the TV rights, like and then book rights, video game rights. So there's like a whole like I don't know. I researched it at one point a long time ago. Don't remember it. But essentially, Sony owns the rights to the Spider-Man movies, like the ability to make them in film. And a lot of their contract with Disney was based on, you know, numbers and like the amount of money that they're making, which is pretty obvious. But realistically, like it's all in Sony's hands, or it's all in Disney's hands technically, because Disney has to agree to whatever Sony wants in a lot of ways. And it shouldn't be that much of it. Well, I don't know. I'm not a huge expert in this, but I think it's just interesting how many people were so
worked up or like
and
upset
worked
at
up.
Sony.
I mean, like I was too in a lot of ways because I'm a huge Spider-Man fan.
Right. Well, you also don't want like the movies to end. It's just a whole
thing. I know, but it was like incredibly amazing how much of the world was worked up about this over something that was like.
Well,
no
it was
offense,
also just misinformation.
It's misinformation.
Like, it wasn't even that it was a movie. It was more that you didn't really, and I didn't do this either. It's not like when I saw, I looked up even, which is the most ridiculous thing is that like the next step to seeing a post on Twitter or Instagram is to like click on the link to the news story.
Yeah.
And you never get that far. And it's just because if it, you know, the instant gratification of like double clicking or sharing or whatever is kind of all that we almost have like the ability for at this point, where if you have to commit longer to,
it's too much work.
It's just, and then honestly, like with the Amazon Fire situation, I think I personally tapped into this side of things that I hadn't really experienced before, which is that when you read up on something and do your research and become familiar with the issue, you like have to acknowledge the reality of it.
Oh yeah, I get that all the time.
And so if you just kind of scroll past things, you've done your job. You said you shared it, you liked it, but then you didn't sign up for, or you didn't like take on that emotional baggage or like frustration or sense of helplessness.
That's how I feel a lot about the current political situation. Like, I don't know what it is, but I have a tendency to avoid like articles with, you know, things about the current administration, you know, things about certain bills that might have gone into play. We're not going to say specifics, but, you know, that sort of stuff. So, like, it really, like, and I know a lot of people like this too, when you don't really read about it, it makes you feel like it's not happening. It's not happening. Yeah. Which is, I mean, I guess that's a whole other problem in and of itself, right? Like, it's still going to happen. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I remember with the Force, that's kind of how I felt about it, because if you did the thing, you got as far as like, oh, you know, swipe up to learn more and stuff, you would just read something about like what was going on.
Big article.
And then like I remember, CNN. But I remember seeing this post that was like, or an article that was like, here's what you can do to help, you know, stop the forest like fires. And the number one like tip was to follow this Instagram account. Number two was like donate to this cause. And I was like, but like that doesn't feel actionable enough, like because, you know, all of those things seem long term. I feel like what can I do? Like physically get up and go to the rainforest and fight the fires.
Fires.
But that wasn't even.
Maybe.
I mean, even if that was an option, I don't know if that would have worked, but even that wasn't an option. Like, I couldn't get on my feet and do something.
And what was crazy with that whole situation was not only, like, well, people really wanted to help. Like, I saw that was really common. People wanted to help, which is good, you know, not empty activism in that sense. But people wanted to help. people couldn't find a way to help. And also, Brazil didn't want help. Like, in a lot of ways. Did you see that they refused the G7
the aid money?
The aid money. It was like,
yeah.
I mean, it's only 20 million something dollars.
Well, wasn't it something about
but
like
they refused it.
Their
Political something
like issue with
the G7,
right? And then they like the French dude. And then...
Oh, I don't know about that. I don't see. That's the problem. I avoid all of the. Yeah. Anyways,
but it was like there was a spat between like the Brazilian president and I think the French prime minister.
Oh, okay.
I think that was
that makes sense though. Like why? I mean,
well, okay. Daniel was telling me this, but he was like the
Our
Brazilian.
Daniel, yeah.
Yes, well, you have to edit some of this.
No, we're not gonna edit that out.
Oh my god. Okay,
that's too much work.
Daniel said that the Brazilian president refused to kind of use the financial aid money, like the 20 million, until. What is his name? Emmanuel Macron?
Something like that.
The
sounds familiar.
French prime minister apologized to him for something he said about... Okay. He commented on, like, how the Brazilian president was dealing with the situation.
Oh, wait, I think I saw something about this.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and so he was all, like, worked up about that, and he was like, well, until you apologize...
That's such a bad grudge to hold. Like, not to, you know... say it again, but like the Earth's lungs are dying. I don't know.
Well, I mean, I think if you cared about the whole Earth's lungs thing, the fires wouldn't have happened in the first place.
Well, Brazil, there's like controversy around whether or not, you know, conspiracy about whether or not Brazil did it on purpose. Right. A lot of it was on purpose, in my opinion. I think that was proof.
So again, one version or one like snippet of information I got was that the fires or like setting fires at a small scale isn't like insane. Because they like have to clear forest to like work, whether it is to like to grow or to whatever.
they clear forests to a lot of it's for development and a lot of it's for agricultural purposes. But the problem with that obviously is like clearing forests. Yeah. Like the scale gets out of hand really quick, and I think there was something about the Brazilian government, whether it's the president or just the government in general, really wanted to encourage more like development and agricultural purposing. So like obviously the space has to come from somewhere. So like burning the rainforest is just like one way to do it. So
the problem is that this has been happening for a long time.
Oh yeah, it's been happening for a long time. And that's another thing.
That's the thing. Like just because it like trends on Twitter doesn't mean it just becomes a problem. That's the other thing I kind of like had to acknowledge with the news of the fires was that we've actually been leading up to this for decades. Like all of our daily practices, all of the things that we allow to happen at the larger scale is ultimately what has led to this like what seems like an isolated crisis. So tomorrow when like forest fires start, you know, coming up everywhere or like floods start to come everywhere, people will think these are isolated. And we still do. Like Venice flooded, California is like always on fire.
Yeah.
And people think that these are like isolated kind of tragedies and they don't realize that, well, no, all of this was a long time coming. That's why people who are like truly effective advocates and activists who are like educated and invested, they do this all the time. Climate change activists have been talking about climate change for like over a century because the signs were there back then. And this is the situation that we're in now is what people have been trying to prevent for forever. So it's like the whole stitch in time saves 9 thing. Like
I've never heard of that before.
Or is that like not an American? It's like a proverb.
Stitch
whatever
in 9
adage.
What?
A stitch in time saves 9.
9 what?
So, like,
9 lives?
Like 9 stitches. So like if you have like one rip and you stitch it up right then and like don't wear the outfit again, you don't like rip it more.
Never heard of it, but it makes sense. Maybe it's not educated.
Ancient, I guess. I don't know. I'm out of touch. But it's just like it's
like it's the idea of like is sparking conversation like really like doing anything.
Well, it's the funny thing is that like I think the conversations don't last long.
Yeah, that's true.
So
the length of it and the value of it is what is really
so important. It's like there's an ongoing conversation about say like the practice of you know, whatever, deforestation. Forever.
Yeah, I heard about it, like, I mean, we learned about it in, like,
right,
high school.
And
elementary school.
Even now, even until now, I haven't even made this connection that this is literally part of, like, or a continuation of the conversation I was brought into in freaking middle school. And the whole, that's kind of the whole point, is that, like, there are things that people have been talking about forever. And then because of the kind of power of social media, you tap into that, like, the larger kind of audience taps into that conversation for 2 seconds. And then they're, like, on to the next conversation.
Yeah, and there's the whole, I mean, there's research on this too, but there's the idea of, like, you know, an idea is hot for, like, 3 seconds, basically. And then no one remembers it at the end.
Yeah.
Like, it's really common in, like, Twitter, social media situations where, like, you know, if a celebrity does something crazy and, like, outlandish or gets in a lot of controversy, and then people forget about it in the next, you know, 2 weeks. Yeah it's the same idea.
So that's kind of the issue, and it comes back to what you were saying about research, which is that, like, if you saw a headline when you were 10, you did the research, you got into, like, whatever, climate change, and then you saw the patterns everywhere, you would know that, like, things had been happening for kind of ever and ever. So, like,
which some people have.
Right, like, yeah. I was, like, I became kind of not into, you know, like, I wasn't excited about it, but I learned about it when I was, like, I think in, like, grade 5. And my mom used to kind of be like, oh, this is what's happening, this is what it is, you know, so on and so forth. And so the strategies that we discuss, like, even today, aren't new to me that way, because I've just kind of been, like, I still turn the lights off every time I leave a room, which, like, I know I say that a lot, but, like, it's a thing. Like, it's really something that people should do. And maybe if, like, everyone else had started doing that when we were all 10, you know, who knows?
Who knows? Maybe. We'll see. I mean, yeah.
I don't think, like, that was only, like, a decade ago. So at a scale of, like, 60, 70 years of damage or more.
I mean, most of the damage has happened in the past, like, couple decades.
Yeah. Well, I think it's, like, the kind of exponential, you know, growth. But, like, the 1800s with, like, the Industrial Revolution was... Yeah, that didn't happen. That was a good one.
That was...
Thanks, guys.
Great.
Again, total side note, but I was in Alaska over the summer. And there's, like, the Alaska pipeline, which is this huge thing. Yeah. And they, like, make it a whole... Like, it's in the middle of, like, just wilderness. There's this giant, like, pipeline.
It's the oil pipeline, right?
Yeah, and they talk about the story of, like... how it went down and, like, what it took. And I was like, I think if somebody told me today, like, let's go build the longest pipeline in the world, I would be like, are you crazy? Like,
there was
a lot of controversy about
there's a lot of controversy over oil pipelines through the United States and, like, through Canada. That's a whole other topic, actually. But yeah.
But, well, you know, I guess values change over time. So
values do.
I'm sure, like, on the surface, nobody in this day and age is going to say, well... I take that back. A lot of people in this day and age would not say, I don't care about climate change, like, to your face.
There's some people that would.
That's why I changed. I retracted my statement. But then nobody really, I mean, still a large population doesn't know what to do. And I don't think by any means you and I are, like,
experts,
you know, particularly educated. But I think there is something useful about knowing that you have a gap. So I go back and forth too. I think sometimes I'm a terrible activist because I don't read the news stories because it's, like, too much.
The thing is, with nowadays, with, I don't know, the quote unquote power of social media, like, anyone can be an activist in a lot of ways, but does that mean that they're doing their part, or, like, are they actually being, like, an effective advocate?
Well, like, doing your part is such an interesting concept too, because I had a big argument with somebody on my Instagram, like, DMs, because they shared "Pray for Amazonia."
Oh, yeah.
And I lost it. And
there was so much controversy when people started calling other people out about, you know, thoughts and prayers for, you know, the, you know, people in, like, a shooting or, you know, that sort of thing. Like, what's that going to do?
Right?
You know?
Like, well done. Good
Especially
job.
I think it was, like, a couple weekends ago where there were, I think, 3... mass shootings in one weekend or within a week. That was, like, at that point, I saw people everywhere were getting, like really upset about, you know, the pray for thoughts and prayers for X and X, you know, that was like a big situation, which I guess that's a good thing that people are recognizing the uselessness of
thoughts and prayers. Well, I mean, this is all due respect to, you know, people who think and pray.
No offense to any religions.
No, I mean, I think there's value in that, because you kind of like, if you think about something or pray for a good thing, it is at the forefront of your mind.
Yeah, that's true.
But the kind of like aftermath thoughts and prayers thing is like what doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I'm gonna think and pray about the Amazonia, but then my next thought's gonna be about, I don't know, food, I guess. Bananas. Is that, I don't know what comes from that area agriculturally, but bananas, but yeah, sure, yeah. I mean, there's no afterthought, there's no after action, you know,
or there's no pre-thought or pre-action. Like, it's not timely. It's not educated. So again, like, the people that knew about the issue were doing the thing when other people also should have been doing it. So yeah, I think it takes it takes blame off of yourself. I think that's why it works.
Yeah, I mean, you know, social media's, a lot of it's about taking blame off of yourself. Yeah. If you can have an empty profile, or like just like an avatar or something, like I don't know. Someone said that like social media allows you to be very anonymous, right? And if you're anonymous, you have no responsibility, which is like a huge part of, like, you know, activism is like, take responsibility for the things that are affecting you and others. Yeah. So I don't know.
Or the things that you have been a part of that have like created a problem. That was the hard thing about the forest fires, was to sit there and feel like, wow, like We've contributed to this. Yeah, I definitely but we can't do anything about it. Not even we, like I as an individual, because again, when you say we as a community, you can kind of like, you don't feel like, oh, I to the Gavasa, they have done something to, you know, allow this to happen. But like I had to kind of sit down and allow myself to think that, and then not like come to terms with it, but to face it. And then you're at that level of, okay, wow, this is kind of what I have allowed to happen. How can I do anything? Yeah, especially, and then you see like, oh, like this Instagram page as like your solution.
Especially when you've like faced the fact that you are the person that may have been responsible in part for this. Then you realize that you can't do anything to get that back. Like, you can't undo it, right? Yeah, that obviously, was, like the fires is a huge thing. Like the shootings were also like a huge thing. You can't do anything to like undo that.
Yeah. And so what you do now in this moment in terms of like, well, you know, when you go and like vote
for certain,
or whoever, things. Like whatever it is. The point is that the actions that you will kind of, or the things that you will do today will come back tomorrow in a way that you will not be able to kind of change those consequences.
Yeah. So the most effective like social media activism, quote unquote, is the ones that make you like change your perspective on a certain issue and then take action from then on out. Like, it doesn't have to be right away. Maybe it's more long term, but I think things that like make you consider, like climate change or stuff like that, if it makes you reconsider like what you eat or what you do, your patterns, yeah, that's like the most effective, hopefully the most effective way to do it. I don't know. Yeah. No. That's my opinion.
And then, well, one of the things that we talked about, I don't know how much like time we have left in this episode.
But, we're about like 28 minutes in. We can keep going. It's whatever.
Whatever's fine. I mean, I think a good, actually kind of like to start kind of winding up, a good thought to tie this back into the reason that we like talked about this podcast as a thing.
Oh, yeah.
Was how, you know, I remember we used to say that it's not just about like one person's kind of poorly crafted activism effort is just like not effective. It's actually counterproductive to the whole movement. And I'm guilty of this. Like, I have some people that I follow on Instagram or I'm friends with on like Facebook or whatever that just post stuff all the time. All the time, like,
or reposting like major issues.
It's like just constantly, and I'm just like, I don't know how much of this you believe. I don't know how much of this you're like aware of really, and it's just so annoying to me that every time I like look at your story, it's like sometimes it's about like, what was that, Sudan? Sometimes it's about like the Amazon. Sometimes it's about like, you know, when you run out of like new things, you'll go back to like the political climate as like, oh, now look what's happened, and it's like it makes me less open and like patient to receive actual information.
Yeah, it makes you, it kind of, not to use the same word that we've been using a lot recently, but it leaves you jaded to the idea of like even considering these potential issues.
Right.
So, yeah,
Right.
I see where you're coming from.
So you get annoyed because there's a lot of people just like yelling and shouting, and you don't want to be in that room, even if you care about the issue. So it like when you kind of bring somebody into the sphere of activism, you have to do it in a way that like because you're still trying to sell to them that like this is something worth, advocating for or becoming a part of. So you don't want like, I don't know, like our student held day experience was so good and it was so constructive and
but I don't know, that's like the problem that I have with like advocating effectively on social media is like, is what you're gonna do gonna annoy someone?
Yeah.
Or are people gonna actually care about it?
Well, I think that's kind of like, that's where you have to make the decision as a social media activist, is that you have to
maybe social media is not the best way to do, like, to advocate for things then,
right,
in that sense.
Well, no, exactly. And I mean, you'll obviously always kind of go to a group of people that will like only react poorly, but apparently in like argumentation studies people that's the thing. But people do like research on, you know, if say you and I kind of are of opposing viewpoints and we sit at the table and you kind of willingly listen, even if I don't change your mind at all, like your act of considering my position or even like having the patience to let me present it kind of weakens your stance. Just that act.
Really?
That's what, I mean, that's argument theory again. Like,
so like would you counteract that by like arguing back without listening properly? Or like, oh, that's so weird. Yeah, because I guess that makes sense though.
If you pause to consider like the merits of my argument, you've already like
you've lost that initial like
the dogma, I guess.
Yeah, okay. I kind of see that, but I guess I never thought about it that way.
I mean, like, you would be considered a more balanced person than someone who's just like, oh, no, absolutely not, right?
Yeah.
So, and obviously that way, like, if that person is considered an extreme on one spectrum, you're not at the extreme end anymore, even if you're only like 4 steps away, because just you allowed for a conversation to happen. So I think that's supposed to be the point of like debate, is that if both sides listen and express with like equal, you know, like zeal and like commitment, then inevitably they'll find, well, not inevitably, but hopefully they'll find some kind like of like middle ground, or some settlement where they can agree enough. And so, God, where was I coming from with this?
I don't even remember.
Geez. Something about opposing viewpoints.
It's okay. It's been a long day for both of us.
Yeah. No, well, this is also just a lot to talk about. Oh, yeah, I guess it's a big topic just discussing, like, the whole, is social media the right platform to do these things? I guess you, as somebody who is talking about an issue that I may or may not know about or care about, you know, you just need to create a space where I listen. That's the thing you have to do.
Isn't that like what therapy is like based on, like listening to each other, kind of?
Right. Most of the times, like in a large conversation, and you notice this in class discussions too, like if there's a big conversation going on, most people are waiting for their turn to speak and thinking about what they're going to say and not spending like the remaining 85% of the time listening.
That's true. I see that a lot.
I do that too.
Yeah, because you see people changing the topic all the time. Right?
Yeah, because did you hear what the last person said?
Yeah, instead of building off of the previous argument or comment. Yeah.
So, and part of that is also like, what would be value? Because in a class, you get graded on your participation, which means on you talking.
Yeah. So is it worth, you listening, or is it
right? Like, it's the whole like, loudest person gets the most attention.
Oh yeah,
all of that kind of stuff. So I think those are like all really big things and big bites we just took that we don't have to chew, but
yeah,
it just helps understand the phenomenon, I think, and hopefully us talking about it is like kind of a reminder for us too to like
just
do
be aware
research
of everything,
right? Yeah, like look at a trending hashtag and like do the research.
There's so many movements nowadays. Like everything you do online is movement. Every political anything is like, I saw something online, an article that said something like every trending, hashtag or topic on like Twitter or anywhere on the internet is now like written in the history books, because of like its permanence on the web and also like its impact on people. Like, if it's such an impactful item, then why aren't we talking about it more? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and there's also the issue of like, don't forget about the thing that you were really passionate about 6 months ago.
Yeah, that's a big one. Like the whole Flint, Michigan thing.
Yeah.
Oh my god, that was a topic I wanted to bring up, and I forgot about it this entire podcast. But people still don't have clean water. I mean, there's like there's help going in some instances. I know like Jaden Smith made like some amazing water filtration box
I remember
thing.
this.
Yeah, there's a couple there now. I mean, there's still donations of water going in, but I mean, that was like,
it's not as like a big of a thing as it was.
How long ago did we even hear about that? That was so long. 3 years ago. I don't know.
I think that was
regardless.
before I started college. No,
it
was like I would say it was 2 years ago.
Regardless of that, I mean, like the point is, we heard about it. We all talked about it. I'm sure a lot of us, tweeted or like reposted or posted on our stories. Got worked up about it, and then still nothing happens. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. Hopefully there'll be some change after this.
Yeah, again, like we're also talking in circles. So
yeah, we're literally talking. The whole point of this was just to like, for us to gather our thoughts, I think, on the idea, and like realistically, hopefully us talking about it will make someone realize that they're doing the same thing as well. Yeah. Because I think a lot of us feel it. We just might not notice it right away. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
That's a good
Is that
thought.
a good ending point?
I think so.
All right. Well, do you want to say anything else? Do you want to plug anything? I don't know.
Do I want to plug? I don't think so. I would say, like, go read the news.
Go read the news.
Because I'm going to go do that myself.
Yeah, I have news notifications on my phone all the time, and it's, like...
It's a lot.
It's a lot. It's a lot to take in. It's actually very, like... It hurts my brain a lot of times when I read the news.
Yeah. But it's okay. Yeah. Okay. We're, like, supposedly advocates. And it hurts our brains also, so hopefully people don't feel like it's too much to take on. Okay. Well... Yeah, I'll be back, I guess, at some point. At some point, probably relatively often. I mean, you've been a big like part of the idea of this empty activism, podcast. Thanks. Also, just the topic is very we talk well, I think, on the topic in a lot of ways. So yeah, we're in the middle of it. So yeah, okay, all right. Well, this is Selena. And this is Chithika, recurring character. Recurring character. I think that's what your official title will be. That's what goes on my resume. Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you guys. This is Design and Activism. Bye.